The Galien Foundation fosters, recognizes, and rewards excellence in scientific innovation to improve the human condition.
André Malraux said once in one of his novels, "Une vie humaine ne vaut rien, mais rien ne vaut une vie humaine." Human life is worth nothing, but nothing is worth a human life. All these men and women are trying to save human lives. Is there anything more noble than that?
The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year Best Pharmaceutical Product, Best Biotechnology Product, Best Product for Orphan Rare Diseases, Best Medical Technology, Best Digital Health Solution, Best Incubator, Accelerator, Equity, Best Startup. Around the globe, the Prix Galien is considered as the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for the industry, mobilizing an unrivaled network of Nobel laureates and top biomedical scientists. The Galien Foundation manages an independent, cross-functional, and geographically diverse program of events and sponsorship to brand the best of the best in new medicines and diagnostics. The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Roy Vagelos Pro Bono Humanum Award for Global Health Equity is bestowed to an individual, a company, an academic institution, or a non-governmental agency that has helped to improve the human condition through the application of biopharmaceutical science to problems of developing or underserved populations worldwide.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
Staging this event in Africa is a significant statement that science and innovation are needed as much here in Africa as anywhere else.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Ron Cohen. I'm the CEO and founder of Accorda Therapeutics, and I am delighted to be here today with our four panelists. I'm going to start with just very quick introductions, and then I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will get into the very important subject of biopharmaceutical healthcare incubators. And what are they? Why are they critical to our ecosystem? Why are they critical to innovation and the future of healthcare? With us today, we have Robert Karanja, Dr. Robert Karanja, PhD. He's the co-founder of Vilgrow Africa, and I believe Chief Innovation Officer. Mati Gill, and Robert, I think, is with us today from Kenya, from Nairobi in Kenya. Mati Gill, who is the CEO of Aon, which is Israel-based, but also has operations more widely. I do want to just take a brief second to depart from the usual protocol and thank Mati especially. He's located near the Weizmann Institute in Rehovot. He advised us he may have to drop out if an air raid siren goes off, and in at a time where we are celebrating innovation and the humane aspects of Galien. I think it's very important that we recognize and be thankful that our colleagues and friends in Israel are at the forefront of fighting inhumanity at this time. So thank you for that. And Chris Henschel, who is the Chief Scientific Officer of Cube Labs, and Isaac Middleman, who is the Managing Director of EIT Health. So let me circle back, and Robert, maybe you can give a quick additional background for yourself and Vilgro.
Thank you so much, Ron. Robert Karanja is my name. I'm a biomedical scientist by background. I've been working for the last 20 years, initially as a scientist at the Kenya Medical Research Institute, and then from 2015 as co-founder at Vilgro Africa, which is a early-stage incubator and investor in the health life sciences space.
Terrific. Mati?
Thank you, Ron, and thank you for your words opening. It is, of course, an honor to be here celebrating life and science and innovation, and as we are dealing with some tremendous challenges here in Israel. But I think that just goes to the point of our mission is so important to help save lives and to help make lives better and healthier around the world, so that even while we are defending our country here, we are not losing track, for that we can use every waking second to continue with our missions here at Ion Labs and with the startup companies to be able to help bring breakthrough therapeutics to the world. So as you mentioned, I have the honor of being the CEO of Ion Labs, which is a venture studio based in Israel, backed by Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Merck, Teva, two venture capital firms, Amiti Ventures and Israel Biotech Fund, together with Amazon Web Services, to really encompass bringing in pharmaceutical leadership with cloud-based technologies at the most cutting-edge capabilities of artificial intelligence, and great venture capitalists that can come in and make sure that we're building good ventures and not just excellent research. And we launched a little over a year and a half ago, and we create startups and help them grow.
Terrific. Chris?
So my background is molecular biology. I've been involved for over 40 years in life sciences innovation in public sector, private sector, public-private partnerships, and NGOs. And it is, as far as I can see, one of the most important things that we're all doing. Cube Labs is the latest venture that I've become involved in, and it is a venture builder based in Italy, actually the first life sciences venture builder based in Italy. And I think we're going to spend a lot of the discussion trying to illustrate why these bodies are important in accelerating life sciences innovation.
Terrific. Thank you. Isaac?
Yeah, thanks so much, Ron, and happy to be here. I'm Isaac Middleman, and I work for EIT Health, which is a public-private EU body based in Europe, and a public body there that's dedicated to supporting the translation of life science innovation from lab to market and to patients through a very large consortium of close to 200 partners from pharma, from industry, from investment clusters, hospital networks, patient associations, and the like. And to do that, we run a range of incubation and acceleration programs, including this Venture Center of Excellence initiative, to really ensure that European citizens, but also global citizens, are able to benefit from the innovation developed and stemming originally from the European landscape. And my own background, I'm originally Swiss. I have worked for government in support of technology, and then worked for startups in agritech and in life sciences in the US, in Asia, in East Africa as well, before coming back to Europe, and have been at EIT Health for the past 5 years, helping to build this initiative. Very happy to be here and to be on this panel today. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right. So what I'd like to do is to circle back to you all, and then just to get an individual flavor for each of your incubators, and what the motive force is, what the mission is, and what you've been doing there. And then once we've done that, we're going to open up a conversation about this general model of the incubators and what makes them important, what makes them challenging, how do you go about it, and so on. So, Robert, when we had talked during our prep sessions, you mentioned a few things that stuck with me. You had mentioned that in general in Africa, and particularly in Nairobi in Kenya, there's a reasonably good high-tech presence and reasonably good funding for that, but that biopharma and medtech are lagging way, way behind. And you said a couple of things that really caught my ear. One of which is that you had been at the Kenya Medical Research Institute, or KEMRI, which is like Kenya's version of the NIH, and you have a PhD in parasitology, entomology, vaccines. And what you said was, given the current status of things in Africa, that even if someone found a cure for cancer there, it wouldn't actually see the light of day through KEMRI. So I want to lay that out there because I'd like you to explain that. You also pointed out that because of the lack of opportunity and infrastructure in the life sciences, that when you have very bright college graduates, PhDs, there's a brain drain. They tend to leave. They tend to go to the EU and Japan and the US for their postdocs, and then they don't come back. And that's a big issue. You also said that the cancer death rate in Africa is 5 to 11 times that in the developed world, which is a proxy for how far behind Africa is in gaining access to the most modern therapies. And so Vilgro is looking to play a role in making that better. So why don't you take it from there and maybe explain to us what's Vilgro doing and what's its success been so far and what's your role?
Thank you. Yes. So it does sound crazy, but it's true in terms of one of the reasons that I felt I had to give up my career as a scientist is because there was just no roadmap from the lab bench where I was working to the marketplace. And our institutions are not geared towards commercialization or spin-offs or what have you. What they basically do really well is just great science. And Kenya is not different from many countries in Africa where a lot of the R&D investment has actually been in the life sciences, agricultural health. But when you look at what's happening within the startup ecosystem, you really see just fintech that's really taking off and blowing up big time. And the challenge is, as a sector, we have not yet learned how to integrate the work we are doing back to the national economy. So Vilgro was part of it, driven by a lot of my experiences at KEMRI, where we were developing my own background as a scientist. I was working on vaccines, but we also have an amazing capacity within KEMRI to develop rapid kits for HIV, TB, pregnancy, you name it, we can build it. But none of these products were seeing the light of day because none of us were business people. We didn't understand how to sell the value to those who could actually bring in the capital to take it to the next step. So if you ask me, what's the market size for HIV rapid kit? I'd tell the prevalence of HIV is and just that miscommunication. So I quickly realized we need to figure out a way of solving this problem. And so Vilgro's been, in a sense, working at being the bridge between what's happening within the academia and what's happening in the marketplace, being able to speak to both the language of science, engineering, in terms of biomedical engineering, but also the language of investment and entrepreneurship. And our theory of change is basically, how do you innovate in a frugal manner? How do you employ frugal innovation? And on top of that, couple it with social entrepreneurship. So for-profit, but social entrepreneurship, business ventures that can then close the gap between our problem solution fit to the product market fit. So the African continent, we're very price sensitive. The purchasing power is not as high as in other regions. So you need to be able to understand how, even as you develop your product, how will you actually not just deliver it, but also make it affordable to the target customers. So that is, and over the last 8 years or so, we've been able to support about 50 startups, primarily working within the digital health and also now in medtech in terms of medical devices. And these companies have been able to generate about $15 million in revenue. And this is amazing because it's a proof of concept that you can actually make money delivering healthcare in Africa. And for us, we come in primarily as early stage investors. So we are typically the first institutional investor that the startups would see. And then we incubate those companies to de-risk them further. And of course, make sure that our investment doesn't all go down the drain. And we've seen them create jobs, about 600 jobs so far, being able to unlock about $22 million in follow-on funding. This is both in grant innovation funding and also in venture capital funding. So again, a good proof of concept that you can do much in Africa.
Yeah, where do you source your venture capital and where do you source your technology, and how do you do it? How do you even get knowledge of where the technology is and then convince it that you ought to, they ought to let you help incubate it and then bring in funding? How do you do that?
In the beginning, it was quite tough, but with time, people got to understand who we are. Again, it was really difficult being the first incubator focusing in health, and then saying we're not just going to do digital, we're also going to work with those who are doing hardware, tangible innovations. And the first challenge was just the suspicion, but with time and just being able to stick to it, they actually realized, number one, we are not predatory. We're not trying to throw in very little money and take tons of equity and stuff like that. And then and slowly but surely, it kind of started snowballing, and being able to provide, small ticket sizes, anything from $10,000 to $50,000, and for the good ones, we're then able to double down to about $100,000. It helps to really bring the best of the deal flow to us in terms of early stage. And the beautiful thing about the Build Grow model is it's really built for inventors. So we're able to speak with, we don't necessarily provide the lab, the infrastructure and all that, but being able to provide the business side of it and leverage where you're coming from. If it's a university, if it's a research institute, if it's a makerspace, how can we work with you now to bring what they're not able to bring, which is the soft skills of how do you build a venture and how do you de-risk a technology.
Fantastic. Well, let me move to Mati. Mati, you have a different set of circumstances and a different focus, and yet still you've identified a need for incubators in the AI space as they apply to healthcare. So tell us about that.
Correct. So Ron, we're trying to tackle two different missions here at Ion Labs. One is to bring in cutting-edge AI capabilities into drug discovery and development so that we can shorten the time from the lab to the bedside, from the labs and until we're actually able to save patients and make it a much more affordable, more precise, more effective manner to be able to discover and develop new drugs, and to try to disrupt that process with pharma partners that have been doing drug development for many such years. And so we're trying to bring in that AI technology by creating new startups and bringing in cutting edge entrepreneurs that would never work in a big pharma company, but would like to work with big pharma so that they actually have the market insights as well as the customer product market fit from day one, understanding that they can co-develop with experts in the field, including with Amazon, and be able to bring those type of products to the market. The second,
let me interrupt you for just a second and point something out, because this was fascinating to me when we talked earlier. So your partners include the Israeli government, Pfizer, Amazon Web Services, AstraZeneca, Teva Pharmaceuticals, Merck, the Israel Biotech Fund, Amity Ventures, and Biomed X. That is a quite eclectic array. First of all, some of these are theoretically competitive or competitor pharma companies, right?
Right.
Many of them, if not all of them, have their own internal AI efforts. How did you convince them to collaborate with Aon on all of this and get them to see the value of it?
So they're not theoretical competitors, they're actual competitors. And therefore, I think the first board decision we took was adopting very strict antitrust guidelines and policies. And we open every meeting with such a reminder and protocol to make sure that we are only working in a collaborative manner on pre-competitive areas, so that we are not in any case in breach of our antitrust obligations. And I think, to go to our second mission, that's really where our partners saw this as an opportunity, because they saw this as an opportunity. We all know about the promise of AI and machine learning and drug discovery and development. I'm not saying anything new here. Obviously, this is something that's been talked about for many years, but still hasn't really materialized in our industry to a vast manner. And we're far from the endpoint of what the capabilities can do. And we're probably one of the last, if not the last, industries that AI will actually truly come in and revolutionize, probably because we're dealing with a different scientific discipline in biology and they just work differently, but also because we're ultra conservative, and rightfully so, about what type of medicines we put into our bodies, how we check them, how we regulate them. And we want to make sure that when we are giving medicines, and regulators and governments want to make sure when we're giving medicines that they're absolutely safe and effective to treat whatever they're supposed to treat. So they saw this as an opportunity to say, okay, we all do have, Ron, as you said, our own internal AI programs, but that's not really our core capabilities. Our core capabilities have not been in AI and machine learning. That's not our DNA of the organization, pun intended. And so we need to work with external capabilities. And we're seeing pharma do that more and more. But why did they want to do it together? Because some of these technologies that we're developing are larger than what one pharma company should be creating on its own, like a way of designing antibodies on a computer, for example. And these type of technologies are the type that it's going to be hard to get allocated resources from in a large scale manner within one pharma company. So you can collectively share the risk in that sense. And then these platform technologies can work with the entire industry. In addition, they came together, I believe, because they all wanted to tap into the amazing capabilities that do exist in Israel in machine learning and artificial intelligence. But since none of them, with the exception obviously of Teva and to a degree Merck, had a legacy of doing R&D in Israel, it did make sense to kind of, let's come in and tap into this amazing ecosystem together and try to really strengthen the ecosystem together instead of competing with one another while we do so. So I believe that that's the reason. And, Biomedics, you mentioned, they've been an amazing partner that we adapted their technologies in partnership with them so we can actually build a venture creation model that encompasses all these partners in a flexible and direct manner, so that we can work together instead of each one against each other within this framework.
Right. And do I gather correctly that anything that comes out of it, your partners like Pfizer, Merck, Teva, whoever, basically will do what people do in business, which is to compete for, if they're all interested in it, they'll compete for whoever wants to pay the most.
We set up each one of our startups, we set them up with a direct equity investment. So our partners put in the investment, and in exchange for that, they get equity. The IP of the startup always belongs to the startup solely independently. And then if they want to acquire any rights to the IP, then it has to be a commercial agreement at commercial terms in a competitive process.
Right. And the other thing I'll mention is, I think you said, you're very focused, so you're not looking to put up 20 new companies a year. I think your goal is basically 4 a year to ensure that you've got the quality and the management and so on that you can get.
Correct. We have a system where we always start with a challenge. That's a deep challenge, a big challenge that doesn't have a technology out there already addressing successfully, that needs to be endorsed by at least 2 of our subject matter experts from our partners. Sometimes they can go as high as 5 or 6 if it's really a big challenge. And then we go out to seek, in our second pillar, we go out to seek the best scientific founders from anywhere in the world. They can come from Africa, they can come from Israel, they come from Europe. We've had from every continent besides Australia, candidates that have come in and competed for our processes. And at the end of this process, our partners help us select the finalists, and then they all pitch to the investment committee. We select the one winner, and then we set them up with pre-seed funding and all the infrastructure and co-founding and co-development capabilities so that we can bring them to a point where we validate that their technology actually exists, and then help them to raise their next round so they can continue to grow independently.
Fantastic. All right, let me move to Chris. Now, Chris, when we talked, I'm always interested in what people's the arc of their journey in these areas. And one of the things that stuck out for me is you had a biochemistry degree in R&D, and at some point your wife asked how you were actually going to make a living, and that launched you in new directions. You have worked in industry. You were at Biogen. You were at Centocor, one of the original giants in biotech. You ran a foundation in Geneva for 10 years, and you found yourself in Tuscany, where you met, I think, the original founders of Cube Labs. So tell us, what is Cube Labs? Why are you involved with it? What got you interested in it? And your chief scientific officer. Go ahead.
Well, Cube Labs is a venture builder, which is one of the variants of these accelerators or incubators. They're not all the same, and there are sort of regional aspects of it all. But before going to that, yes, it was actually my now wife, who's American, who asked, how are we ever going to make a living? So I at that time was such an innocent academic that it never entered my mind that at some point I might have to do that. But that was a hell of a long time ago. But to get back to today, Cube Labs is really the concept of its founder, Filippo Suraccia, who was an adjunct professor at Temple University in Philadelphia. And I think he noticed the excitement in biotech that was along the East Coast and, of course, in California when he was there. And he sort of realized that that excitement and that translation of concepts from labs into products and companies was not what was happening in Italy. So he went back and asked himself the question, what could he do? And basically, Cube Labs is the result of that what could he do question. So basically, it ties into the academic science base in Italy, which is, by citation index terms, I think the 8th in the world. It's actually higher on a per capita basis. It's got a fantastic history of innovation in life sciences, particularly if you think food, but also in terms of instruments and so on. I think it's above Germany, for example, in some aspects of instrument development. So this tells you that there's a huge opportunity, but it also begs the question, why wasn't that opportunity really being exploited? What we found out, what Filippo found out, was that these intermediary organizations with the space and expertise and network, frankly, to access the whole ecosystem of life sciences innovation, whether it's intellectual property, whether it's non-dilutive funding, whether it's early series of fundings, whether it's company formation. And by the way, the reason we call ourselves a venture builder rather than an accelerator is that we usually get involved before the company is actually formed. We're not trying to take early companies and accelerate them. We're trying to create the early companies. So to date, some 13 companies have been created within Cube Labs. In each case, Cube Labs has at least 51% of the equity in the companies. It's also unusual in that the scope is very, very broad. It's basically the whole of the life sciences, from therapeutics to medical devices to nutraceuticals. and even now recently cosmetics. So incredibly broad. And some people have asked me, isn't this a disadvantage? And I actually think it's a huge advantage. And the reason I say that is because one of the things that we can do, which highly specialized organizations can't do very easily, is find synergies between things that initially appear to be completely different and to have nothing to do with each other. So some of our pipeline now are projects that start off with a sort of nutraceutical concept and then a hydrogel concept, and now it's a COVID product. And that was like put together by the higher level of thinking that we can do at Cube Labs than can be done in the expert companies themselves. So yes, we're slightly unusual. We have the positives of Italy, but we're now developing into a pan-European type organization. So maybe a little bit like Isaac is going to talk, you know, we're trying to be pan-European, and we now have a footprint in several countries in Europe.
You are also a listed entity. Is that right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. I should have said that. There was an IPO in a specialist section of the Borsa Italiana, a section obviously to do with early stage companies and to do with investors who are quite seasoned investors. So that is the status. We are actually a listed company on Euronext. You can look us up on Euronext.
Fantastic. So, you know, as you've been describing what Cube does, it occurs to me that, you know, we've just heard about three models, and the models are very different, but all are pushing toward getting innovation developed and out there. And the differences I'm hearing are some of them are laser focused in particular areas, particular parts. Others, like Cube, actually spread a much wider net. Some of them take equity. Some of them take minimal or no equity. Some of them initiate companies, and some of them accelerate existing companies, or some combination of both. So I think we're beginning to get a flavor of the enormous variety in this ecosystem, and we'll come back to that as well. Isaac, your turn. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at EIT. And I do want to quote you from when we talked earlier. On a personal level, you called yourself, and I'm quoting this, a mutt of a person, because you are part Swiss, part German, part American, and you're French speaking. You also have an unusual combination of educational background in biology and political science, obviously closely related. So tell us, with that very interesting background, how did you come to join EIT, and what is the model at EIT?
Thanks, Ron. I hope I'll live up to that. And so it was a little risky coming at the end of the last person to introduce their model here, because everyone else has already shared a lot of interesting insights and a lot of interesting things. So I'll try and not be repetitive and say something interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned my own background. I mean, my own background is, as you said, diverse on a personal level, but also on an educational one. So I have been interested in political science, and then realized I wanted to do what or scratch the itch that you could argue all political scientists have, and that is to also become real scientists, right? And so I followed studies in biology as well, in order to be more credible in that sector. I said it, I can say it, so that's all right. But I think if I can build on that theme, I think you've pointed out an interesting point there, Ron, about this difference between breadth and depth. And there is a little bit of a strategic positioning question there, right? Where, I mean, we have the great challenge and the great beauty of operating in a sector that does require really deep understanding, be it scientific, be it market-based, be it patient understanding as well of what innovation needs are, what the challenges to rollout are and to scalability are, et cetera. And so there's no, replacement for being able to really drill down into the detailed needs of the innovations that we are supporting or working with. But then to Christopher's point as well, there is value as well in covering a broader market space, realizing that increasingly what we're seeing as trends in innovation, and Matthew made this point as well, is the confluence of digital technologies like artificial intelligence and drug discovery at the same time. And if you're not able to have the brilliant minds of the AI world interact with the lab scientists on the pure small molecule or biotech side, then you're missing out in a huge area of innovation, be it when it comes to antimicrobial resistance, for example, or bioproduction technologies, or whatever it might be. If you think about patient-centric care, a keyword that we hear a lot about, patient-centric care also inevitably involves digitization, right? Because patients want to understand what's being done to them. That's increasingly seen as being an ethical right as well that they have, of course, and I think we should all be thankful for that. But then that also then requires dealing with issues of privacy, issues of data management, et cetera, as well. So I think there's a key need, as we see it, to being able to tap and drill down into the detail by pulling a network in. And that's essentially what EIT Health is, right? At our core, we're a consortium, as I mentioned earlier, of partners. So we're able to go access the key opinion leaders and the key thinkers when it comes to specific areas of technology, of innovation, of key questions, if you will, that we ask in this space. And we do that through our network of academic partners and industry partners and investors and others. But then we also really seek to build bridges. And that's both on a European level, where we have, let's be honest, a fractured landscape of 27, 28, if we add Switzerland, right? 29 if we add Israel, et cetera, different marketplaces with different market access regulations, different healthcare payer systems, different politics as well in terms of the rollout of innovation. So what we find is that we need to find points of commonality and similarity to support the scale up of innovation and its maturation and its delivery then to market and to patients. That requires true collaboration, true cooperation between different entities and different perspectives in order to be able to serve the most citizens and patients as possible. But then we also seek to respond to this challenge that Europe has traditionally had of being a very rich and fertile ground of academic research, a pretty vivacious startup ecosystem in a lot of places, but sometimes a challenge translating that fundamental research into viable companies, and then especially sustaining those companies, those startups and scale-ups over time as they fundraise and as they mature. And so that's really where our message is, if you are a Spanish entrepreneur who has stumbled across something, so to speak, in a lab, and the key opinion leader that you really need happens to be Swedish, and the investor in this space happens to be Italian, and the initial market you'd like to conquer happens to be French, it is our job to try and make that happen and to break down the silos that naturally exist culturally, geographically, linguistically, et cetera, between those sectors to make sure that that innovation can be translated to market and to patients. And ultimately, we believe that benefits global patients as well, because of course it's about the European landscape, but it's also then about making sure that global players can access European innovation effectively and efficiently, and without having to deal with that fractured landscape challenge. So that's essentially who we are in a nutshell, and what we seek to do.
Would it be fair to say that the focus here is that you identified that the EU, in fact, obviously it's one of the world's major economies taken together. It's one of the world's greatest sources of innovation in healthcare and elsewhere. But because of that fracturing, in contrast to, let's say, the US, it really has not develop the kind of robust ecosystem that we see in the US of various levels of funding and sources and entrepreneurship and so on. So it sounds like the goal, correct me if I'm getting this not right, but that EIT really is trying to serve as the stimulus and the glue, if you will, that brings all these disparate parts together and allows them, hopefully, to create a more efficient system of innovation and value creation in the healthcare space. Is that fair?
I think that's a good summary. I think you're right about the challenges, and I think what's nice to see is that there's increasing awareness, and I think honesty and transparency about some of those challenges in the EU ecosystem that are being spoken about, which wasn't always the case. So that's great. You know, you can't fix a problem unless you diagnose it, right? We all know that. So that's one. Two is really also then capitalizing on some of the strengths of the European ecosystem. So it's not just about mitigating some of the challenges compared to other global markets. It's also about making those advantages and those strengths easier to access. I'll cite one here, sort of out of the blue, as it were. If you look at actual investor performance in startups, in investments into startups in Europe, the multiple of capital generated by investors has historically actually been higher in European startups than it has been in US ones, because valuations are lower, because the efficiency of the translation and the usage of capital into progress by the company is higher for a whole range of reasons. So it's also about making sure that that's well known, that message is out there, and that we're capitalizing on some of those strengths. And finally, I think there's a role here as well of us being a public-private entity, and I emphasize that on purpose. And that is, I think we are also useful to the European Union, to the various commission ministries, as a consortium entity that they are able to approach and will say, you know, we are looking to launch a new initiative in the fast tracking of market access of digital medical devices, for example. We would like to work with you as EIT Health to understand where the market is today, where the real pain points are, what everyone needs in order to be able to move the marker in the right direction, to facilitate this, and to make sure that our policy actually can be translated into real world impact. And so that's a key role as well that we serve in that direction.
Yeah, and just to give a sense of the scale to our audience today, am I correctly remembering that EIT has raised over $3.5 billion in funds so far, either supported the raising of or helped to raise over $3.5 billion. So this is a fairly large scale operation, and you source from everywhere in Europe, Central Europe, EU, Israel, and so forth. I think so. Again, you know, for the audience, a very different scale and type of model relative to what we've heard. Do you ever find yourself stepping on each other's toes between Cube Labs and EIT, since Cube has got you're focused in Italy, but of course you have a remit across all of Europe. Have you ever actually wound up going for the same technologies at the same time?
Well, I'll answer that. No. So we will. There'll be no fighting on this call, at least. No. No, but I think the question is a good one. Chris, feel free, of course, to step in here as well. But I think this is where what we see our role being is not replacing, substituting, copying what different clusters, investors, corporates, academic entities, whatever it might be, incubators are doing. We see our role as being precisely leveraging the good work that individual entities are doing in a given ecosystem or in a given subsector or in a given region, and to really thinking about, okay, you do this very well. Why would we substitute that? But can we actually leverage your ecosystem? Can we support in the areas where you're not able to support your own clients, so to speak? Can we connect you to a body elsewhere in Europe that's doing something similar in a different sector so you can share lessons learned and the like? So it's very much, we're very mindful. Our role is not to replace or to substitute what the private sector is doing or national bodies or regional bodies in Europe, because there's a lot of great stuff going on out there. And they are, of course, experts of those to a degree that we are not. But but rather it's about being, as you mentioned, Ron, and I like this term, being the glue, being the bridge, whatever the metaphor is you want to use to precisely leverage that. So I don't think there's any friction between us, and in fact, I think there's probably opportunities for further collaboration moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one interesting trend that I think comes out of this discussion that I think investors understand, but possibly not many other people, which is the tiered valuations that you get in Europe versus the US. So we tend to have lower valuations in Southern Europe, higher valuations in Northern Europe, higher valuations probably in London, and then probably highest valuations in NASDAQ and so on. And what I think investors have realized is that if you can work these tiered valuations to your advantage, you can fish in a low valuation area and transfer things to a higher valuation area. It's one method of getting returns into the capital that's brought into this area. It is certainly something that we talk quite a lot about, because Italy, well, it's only one country, but of course there's quite big differences between northern Italy, perhaps the golden triangle of Rome, Milan, Trieste, Bologna, and the south and Sicily. So we operate over the whole country, and we really have to understand these very fine points of how different things operate in the particular environment that we try to work with. And then, as I said, we're trying to become more pan-European now. So we're getting much more sophisticated in how things operate differently in different European countries. There's another, for example, typically in Italy, the inventors in the labs are the initial owners of the intellectual property. Whereas, for example, in the UK, that wouldn't be true. It would be the organization that would be the owner of the initial intellectual property. And this has quite profound implications in how you deal with opportunities in Europe. So I think that the truth is we're not competitors. We're all kind of learning from each other. It's a very dynamic environment. And it's a very exciting environment.
So I'll just build on Christopher.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, buddy.
Comment is that, we at Ion Labs, we launched our model, which we really designed from scratch together with our partners and adopting the biomedics model. And we saw and were able to witness incredible collegiality amongst the different venture hubs, venture studios, incubators, innovation labs, both in Israel and abroad, that each were not only willing, but actually eager to help teach us what works for them and what their mistakes are. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to curse here, but we had our own little mini sessions of, F-up nights and just on calls. And they were very open and transparent about what doesn't work. And so I made a promise to myself as Ion Labs is that we will always pay it forward. And we will openly teach any new venture studio that wants to build itself up, wherever it is in the world, even if it's down the street in Israel. We'll teach them what doesn't work for us so that, they can learn from our mistakes and then go on and make their own, just like we are as well.
So I just want to tell the audience, we have about 11 minutes left of the session. And if any of you have questions for our panelists, there's a Q&A function where you can type in your questions and I can transmit those. So please feel free. So in the time we have left, let's talk about the challenges. Let's talk about, each of you, you've really brought out the wide variety of models in this ecosystem, but also the commonalities, which is to either initiate and accelerate the path from someone having an idea, an invention, some insight, and turning that into a developed, usable healthcare product or products that will be of benefit to society, and in many cases also be a useful business proposition. And you just mentioned the F up nights, Marty. So we know none of what you're doing is easy. All of you have had mistakes along the way, and all of you have had to learn from those mistakes. I suspect there's a lot of commonality because you have an awful lot of stuff you're doing, sourcing technology, getting investors interested, whether it's a platform or a particular product, or, dealing with the vogue of the moment where investors, as we know, often go in herds and go, well, this is what we want now, and that's not what you're working on, so we're not investing it, even though it might be very meritorious. So help us understand what have been your challenges? What are the key lessons you've learned in working to bring all this to fruition?
So if you want, I can jump in with so like an intervention studio, one of the key elements is shutting down programs that don't work, right, and taking those decisions quickly. And so we put a 2-year timeline to shut down startups, and we've already, in our 1.5 years, been able to shut down one. Now, why did we shut down that startup? Not because the team wasn't good; they were excellent. It was an excellent group of founders. But when we really sit down and decipher it, when we selected a challenge that was endorsed by 3 different pharma companies, leading pharma companies in the world, we realized that we as a team, and that's my responsibility first and foremost, didn't sit down and take the time to really scrub through in the most thorough manner the problem statement that they were trying to address. And what we learned from there is that a great problem statement for a good research project is not necessarily a great problem statement that can be the foundation of a future startup with a product that can go on and raise capital and continue to grow. And so after a year working with them, we realized that even though the pharma companies all need this project, it's more of a pet project to help each one of the pharma companies do their work a little bit better incrementally, and not something that will be the foundation of a great startup. So we've now implemented a deep dive process, which my CTO leads, my partner and CTO at Ion Labs leads, where he works with the subject matters and asks them a series of questions. And we are then the gatekeepers to make sure we never release a challenge that is not thoroughly past all this deep dive process, and even having to say to VPs and pharma companies that truly believe in their challenge that this is not at the level that we can actually release and then build a startup on.
Great. Anyone else want to jump in?
I would say, there are 2 kinds of challenges that I notice. One are the old challenges which have never gone away. I think we just heard one example. It's always difficult to kill programs. That's always been the case. But there is one new challenge that I've noticed, and that is just the acceleration in available information that is pertinent to what we're doing. I mean, even in a focused venture builder, like one focusing on artificial intelligence, the amount of information just in that area is increasing so quickly that it's almost impossible to keep abreast of it. And sometimes we feel kind of a bit hopeless because of that. And the IBM have done a study, and basically they've said that when I was doing my PhD, the total base of world knowledge changed about once every year. That is to say, it doubled once a year, measured in petabytes. Now it's in days. The amount of knowledge doubles in petabytes in every few days, and it's impossible to keep on top of it. So I don't know how others face this challenge, but I think what we have decided to do is that we don't even want to pretend we're experts in everything that we do. We try to find the best possible partners who are the most expert or who have some other advantage. That's how we deal with this very modern challenge.
Yeah. I think you're on mute, Ron.
We have an audience question, so let me interject for you all. This is actually specifically for Robert. what can the incubators in the global north learn from the incubators in the global south and vice versa?
Wow. I think, first of all, in the global south, there's lots of opportunity to partner, to be honest. One of the things that has always struck me that's very peculiar about the global health space is tons of the expertise actually resides in the global north, but very far from the target market for their innovations. And I think one of the things that we would really excel at is in terms of the product market fit. What's your go-to-market strategy, and how can innovations that are getting stuck in the global north actually tap into platforms like ours to be able to then take the ideas to market? Because if you're seated in California and you're thinking, Africa, where do I start? Who do I talk to? What regulatory? We have all those answers, and also tons of experience in terms of taking ideas to market that could benefit. And then likewise, I think so for example, right now, one of the areas that we've all talked about is AI, machine learning, and how this is coming to drive biotech and drug vaccine discovery. And that's an area that I think for Africa is an amazing opportunity that can really accelerate and reduce the commercial and technical risk for drug vaccine development that Africa should grab and really take to the limit. So there's lots of opportunities to learn from one another.
Something that occurs to me listening to you is that I've followed to a certain extent some of the developments in Africa over the years, and what strikes me is the amount of innovation at the grassroots level in Africa is stunning, because they don't have the resources that we have in the global north or the west. They don't have anything like access to the modern, the technology and so on. So they have to improvise. And the level of improvisation is really quite remarkable. It occurs to me that as we're talking here, let's face it, there's a bias, right? There's a bias toward the wealthier countries, the more technologically advanced countries. And yet, if people would really delve and maybe collaborate with groups like Vilgro, it would be very interesting to get a better understanding of what that level of grassroots innovation is, because I am quite sure people would be very surprised on the upside. And maybe the four of you should all get together at a conference and trade ideas.
Yes.
Sounds great.
One of the incubators that I was involved in earlier, MMV in Geneva, actually had calls for proposals that were targeted specifically for African scientists. So there is a realization that this is a well that has a fantastic amount of opportunity in it.
Yeah, and speaking of the valuation ladder that you all were talking about earlier, for those who really want a chance at multiplying their investment, you probably you couldn't do better than start with that. We are right near the end, and frankly, we're just getting started, unfortunately, because I could talk with you all for a long, long time. Just in closing, anything that any of you would like to summarize or impart to our audience?
I could jump in and really just say, there's lots of opportunity that makes me really excited to be doing what we're doing today. And, we talked about the fragmentation of the market in Europe. Africa, we have 54 countries, all with different regulatory. So you can imagine it's crazy. But then we're now setting up the Africa Medicines Agency that starts to build out a Pan-African regulatory framework, and lots of opportunity really to do, to overcome the traditional barriers of investing and focusing in Africa's health challenges. So just wanted to put that out there and encourage anybody who is thinking global health to reach out and see what we can do.
Yeah, I would. Sorry. Yeah, I completely agree, Robert. And we'll definitely follow up after this webinar as well, and happy to continue the exchange. I guess the final thing I would say is, and this might seem a bit strange to say in a webinar organized around this question of incubation, equity, and acceleration, but the message is also very clearly, and I know all of us would agree with this, it's not all about the money. I think there is sometimes a focus still on, the fundraising side, the equity side, et cetera, the non-dilutive funding as well, opportunities. And of course, that's critical. And as a CEO or founder of a startup, you are constantly fundraising and managing the financial questions. But I think it's key to also remember that quality acceleration, quality incubation, and even quality investment really comes down to that strategic qualitative support of the innovation. It is all about the teams that you build, the access to the knowledge, the ability to grow the innovation from a non-financial perspective and to deal with those challenges that are inevitable, that needs to be blended and merged well with the financial roadmap in order to really deliver that innovation. I think we would all agree with that. But I think it's important sometimes to dare to look away from the dollars and the cents, or the euros and the cents, or whatever, and to really think about it as being surrounding that innovation with what they need, which includes finance, but also everything.
Very nice.
Completely
Very nice
echo
summary.
that. Really echo that. One of the things that we haven't talked about,
Well,
we haven't had
just
time to
to
talk
tell
about,
you,
is
we have about
impact.
30 seconds, so go ahead, Chris.
The impact, the likely impact of social capital that's coming into this equation. And actually, the Rockefeller Foundation have done a fabulous white paper on how this is going to impact this whole area.
Wonderful. Matti, do you have a final word?
Yeah, I'll just say that what I always tell entrepreneurs is raising $50 million.
I think we've been cut off.
Okay.
But go ahead. I'd like to hear what
Well,
you
I was
say.
just going to say is what I always tell very ambitious entrepreneurs is that raising $50 million is not your goal. Building a great company that will go on to make you and your investors very wealthy and also do a lot of good in the world, that's a goal. And when you raise $50 million prematurely at a very high valuation, just because you see a few of your peers in Boston have done the same, your investors are going to actually expect that money back. And if you 100%. Do it prematurely and not with the right foundation, it's better to build it in the correct manner, in a staged manner when you're ready. And that's where doing it in such a platform like ours is
100%. Hey, listen, everyone, this was terrific. When I moderate a panel, I always want to be interested in what everyone's saying, and sometimes that works well, sometimes it doesn't. But this was absolutely riveting. So thank you all for your participation. And I hope
who's hosting the first forum of global incubator?
I'm open for that.
Kenya,
see you in Nairobi then.
Yes.
If you all do that, please invite me. I'd love to come.
All right,
some of
Robert,
us
send the
gonna be in
invitation.
New York,
We should put together a list of who to invite. Galien can probably help us there because they have all the nominees. And then we can just do it and learn from each other. And meet
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everyone, have a great week, and look forward to seeing you again sometime. Bye for now.
Thank you all very much. Thanks a lot, Ron, for moderating. Great job, too. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Very good. Great.